Hello everyone, hope you're well and thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Still Artist Residency. My name is Siwa Mgoboza. I am the founding artistic director and the curator of Ditiro Mashigo's show. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome Ditiro and thank you for joining me. And then I just briefly want to read her bio and then I'll read a little bit of the curatorial statement, and then we'll get into her work. Ditiro Mashigo is a textile artist, textile and fashion designer with an impressive educational background. She holds a diploma in fashion design and textile design and an advanced diploma in fine and applied arts from the Tshwane University of Technology. She is currently pursuing a postgraduate certificate in fine arts and studio arts, specializing in fiber art from the same institution. Her passion lies in the intersection of art, fashion, and the critical analysis of African art and fashion. In 2014, Mashigo established her fashion and decorative art brand, Serati. The company is renowned for its high craft clothing and textile designs. She is recognized as a Design Indaba alumni and served as a curator for the Emerging Creative Festivals class of 2022. Among her notable achievements, Mashigo designed performance uniforms for the renowned Soweto Gospel Choir and has collaborated with Mr. Priceholm. More recently, she has taken on a role of a researcher at the Miss Simone Art Consultancy Company. And born in Lebowakgomo, Limpopo in 1990, Mashigo later relocated to Pretoria, where she completed her studies, then Mankweng, Limpopo, where she currently resides and works. Actually, that is not where you currently reside and work. You have been living in Johannesburg here at the studio for the past couple of months.
Yes.
How has that been working at a residency for the past couple of months?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that, Siwa. That very brief, but it always humbles me to hear sort of like what I've been working on over the years. But moving from Pretoria to Johannesburg and then Limpopo has been quite an experience, because the desire has always been to work in Johannesburg. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. So not being able to completely settle in at the first try was quite a blow to my creative process. And then coming back in and out of the city for 3 months, because that's how much I really wanted to be here. Then also that just fueled my fire to really be here. And then getting the opportunity to be in residence at Still Art, finding a space that is quiet, a space that is safe, a space especially for my creative process. I mean, one would underestimate the value of just having the time to create, the space to create, and the freedom to just be. And in the last 2 months that I've been here, that's essentially what that has been, my unpacking of the last 6 months, and then putting that on canvas, putting that on paper, interpreting it not as experiences that have been destructive to my process, but rather mediums that I work with to create the tapestries that I've created in this new body of work.
And on that note of the new body of work, I'd like to read a bit of the curatorial statement that was written about this show that we'll shortly speak about. iZulu liKhaya, the heavens are my home, in Zulu encapsulates the core essence of Mashigo's latest body of work. This work challenges traditional perceptions of the sky and the concept of home, exploring these themes through a deeply personal lens that blends imagination and lived experience with reality, drawing from childhood memories and the enchantment of fairy tales. Mashigo's work reflects her journey from Lebowakgomo, Limpopo to Pretoria, a move that stirred feelings of displacement and a request for belonging. This artistic exploration reinterprets classic tales through an African perspective, using fabric paint, wool, and cotton threads, pastels on brown paper, and bull denim to weave a narrative that is both tactile and evocative. Mashigo's distinct approach emerges from the softness and warmth of fabric with the solidity of paper. The brown board serves as a metaphorical skin, while the embroidery offers a dynamic interplay of tension and relief. The loose charcoal and layered paint speak to the ephemeral nature of moving clouds. These dichotomies speak to Mashigo's exploration of the divine, beauty, and the formlessness sources of her inspiration. Through her unique use of materials and techniques, blending her background as an artist, textile and fashion designer, Mashigo crafts a space where the heavens are not just above but within, urging us to reconsider our own connections to the world around us. Could you tell us about the title of the show? How did you think about that?
So I usually love to title my work after whether it's a hymn or a song or a chorus that I sing throughout the creation process.
Right.
So there's a song by Zulu. It's very catchy, and Zulu's like a, I think, charismatic hymnist. And there's this song that just keeps playing, iZulu, liKhaya, laMi, and it's both sad, but it's also a celebration of what the heavens mean to him, and then the heavens mean then to me, especially in this body of work. So I felt that title resonated clearly with both the feeling that I had throughout the creation process, even just where I was just in transit, like leaving home, coming here, like that very meditative space of transit where you're on the road for 4 hours and there's just this one song that plays on loop. And that's my kind of experience over the past few months. So yeah, it felt very natural to title it that. My previous body of works also, I anchor them very much in different hymns and songs. I love to do that. I think music is also a beautiful way to marry the physical making and the ephemeral or the vibrational frequency of a work. And if you're able to create a good synergy between that sound and that tactile or that artwork, then you have a full experience that people are able to immerse themselves in when they engage with your work.
I wonder, you mentioned these hymns, choruses, and I'm guessing potentially verses. So can people assume that you have a religious background or some sort of religious affinity?
Absolutely, because of my background. I mean, my mom was very instrumental in making sure that I got to church every Sunday.
Right.
I mean, there was a time for about 6 years or so, especially when I was in varsity, and I thought Sunday mornings were only for sleeping. I thought going to church was not a thing, but before that 6 years and then after that, I'd say I came into a more emancipated understanding, because then I was not going because of a pattern that I was taught, but rather something that I chose. So Christianity, I chose. I love to tell people that I did actually go through all the doors and ask all the questions and seek out what God is. And at the end of the day, what I understood was what was at home. That is what resonated clearly and distinctly with who I am, and then also who I want to be. So Christianity always, I mean, it's not necessary. Sometimes it's not even intentional, but because it's who you are, it translates in your work. And I think, this time
I'm thinking specifically when we look at the initial works that when you walk into the studio space next door, the red, black, and white works, they remind me a lot of the Methodist uniform. Is that something that you were thinking about?
I was immersed in that.
Okay.
Yeah, because at the time, so this is work from 2023, 2024, 2022. So it's process work from the last 2 years. I, at the time, decided to join Barwetsana, which is the young woman's manyano in the Methodist Church. My thinking around that was really to create this sort of structure around myself.
Okay.
Because I think now it's becoming clear I have a very big fixation with home, and whether it's home within self or home within community, but being part of that community of women was beautiful, and it still is, although now I'm in a different space, so my engagement with that space is no longer the same way as it was in the previous 2 years. And I find that to be very interesting. But at the time, really, it was me working from a lived experience, similar to the work that is embodied now. Yeah.
And then, so before we get into the new work, I think also from your textile background, your installation, Dikano,
Yes.
My apologies, I think also echoes those patterns, or rather clothing that is used in church. I see it in the threads, I see it in the gold. Could you tell us a little bit more about that installation?
That installation was, it was the very last bit of work that I created at the end of last year, working towards an exhibition I had. And my meditation on it was just on the kind of the concept of promises, talents, the gifts that all of us are born with. Whether you want to call it genetics, hereditary, whether you want to call it luck, whatever it is, that one comes into this physical plane with the abilities to do. Some people I would say, I mean, the work is a body of totems that speak to individuals' experiences with their own talents. And I didn't want to limit it to necessarily my experience as a Methodist. I didn't want to limit it to Christianity. So everyone who engages with the work relates to it differently. One person said to me at some point that it reminds them of the kind of the ropes that the Judaism, yes, that community of people have on their attire. Another says that it reminds them of the Apostolic Church and the ropes that they tie around their uniforms. And that is a universal language within the space of uniform. One would just need to understand where they are in order to understand that specific body of work. And that's essentially what I was trying to get at. And as much as I impose some of my own identity within the work, but I also try unintentionally, but fortunately it happens, to allow the work to reach beyond what I then understand it to be. Because when I created it, I loved those talismans. I thought working with those ropes reminded me of when my mom used to braid my hair as a child, and how that relationship that I had with her, that very tactile relationship that I had with her, also fed into my love for textiles. You know, that's probably where it really actually began. Although I can say that winning a competition at 10 years old and getting my first batch of fabric paints could also be that place. But I know that intuitively it probably comes from it comes from further back than that. So the beauty of, I'd say, an installation like that is that it is open to interpretation. One does just need to look into themselves and see themselves in that piece.
Right.
And yeah, that's how I really engage with it, and that's how I try not to limit its ability to speak.
And just sort of my own personal curiosity, but how did you come about to design uniforms for the Soweto Gospel Choir?
That was a sheer. So I'm relentless in my in my endeavors. I had a collaboration that I was working on. I think it was 2019 with Zadia from Something Good, And on a whim, we decided that, you know what, let's go to Design and Daba, and let's just take over the world, have a stand there. This is at zero budget. I don't remember. I think I was asking people for, you know, when you really just bantering and asking for money, and I was fundraising for myself because we agreed to meet each other halfway for that project. We wanted to exhibit these blankets that we'd been working on together. So we get to Cape Town, and fortunately, I think that's the beauty of being so deeply committed to doing something, is that the moment you show up, there's just so many other elements and angels and beings and forces that work in your favor. And I would tell you that the events that happened in that week alone, coming into, going to exhibit and then coming back, I really can't explain. But I figure, that's why I tell you the story, because I figure that it has something to do with that particular collaboration and our force or our drive to get our work seen at that platform. Because then I met people from the Department of Arts and Culture, and they thought this is incredible, and you know, this kind of work could apply to, you know, a uniform, and you're a fashion designer, me being a fashion designer. I thought, okay, yes, sure, why not? I was called on a whim. I was not even briefed properly. I had like, I think 4 hours to create samples, designs, and then the very next day I had to meet the then Minister of the Department of Arts and Culture at the time, and also the President of South Africa, who was still Ramaphosa at the time as well. And
still is.
Yeah, still is. And then the choir. So it was just, so I'd say I do not underestimate the strength and the drive and the energy that goes into one's need and desire to create and show up. I think it's very important, because you really do not know what kind of doors your gifts are opening for you. I'm a testament to that. In everything that I've experienced, I can say that truly God has actually shown up for me in so many different ways.
Fast forward through all those things, and literally fast forward from the work that you have up there, you now has moved away from printmaking and sculpture. Well, not moved away, but you've changed a bit, particularly the medium that you're working with. And you've chosen, I guess, to stay true to your background as a fashion designer and using fabric paint. There's color involved, there's abstraction. Could you tell us about the new works that you've developed while you've been here still?
It's a fortunate or a unfortunate, I'd say it's a fortunate thing that happened. So not being able to work with chemicals, not being able to work with solvents, the usual kind of practice. So it's not that I don't want, I would love to go into studio and create monoprints and screen print and develop screens, but all those processes are hazardous to my condition at the moment. So I had to...
Well, some of us might not know. What is your condition?
I'm expecting a little one. So being mindful of that...
Congratulations.
Thank you, Siwa. So being mindful of that, I really had to say, I mean, it goes back to what I was just saying now, that I didn't allow that to be something that stops me. I thought, what is the next thing I can do? And because I already have the skill set, I already have the tools, what I needed was just a surface. And what came to me readily was paper, board paper, and I used it to its maximum, I think. Now it's, I was saying very jokingly to someone that maybe I should cut one up and create a jacket out of it and just see what it looks like, just because I can. But not only that, but because that's just how much I love to explore my mediums. and I'm not afraid to, go into a deconstructive mode and kind of look at the different ways that I can explore a particular medium, especially the ones that I work with. One medium that I did work with this year that I'm not too familiar with was the pastel, which was the black, and that was sort of a rendition or an ode to Johannesburg. When I was here earlier on this year, I got this warning on my laptop that said air quality is at hazardous levels. And to me, coming from Limpopo, where the skies are completely blue, and you can't fathom air pollution, reading something like that was very scary. So unintentionally, though, the smudging work that goes over the work over some of the pieces is kind of an ode to that awareness of pollution. But yeah.
And would you say that is maybe that alert is what prompted you to start looking up and potentially start having that action of looking up take you away from generally working on the floor or working with your braiding hands and looking down, and as the work is inspired, you started looking at the sky? Do you think that was potentially something that was prompted? You took it either consciously or subconsciously, but nonetheless it was planted.
Maybe subconsciously, because what happens with, I think, the process for me is that because I've been in process for so long, I believe a process does not start when you start creating necessarily. The process is when you become aware of a certain thing and it just keeps coming back. I've always had a very big fixation with the sky, and the sky from different places. So a sunset in the Cape in November, it's beautiful. A sunrise over Ghana in winter is stunning. And these are colors that last for just a brief second. And one doesn't really, when you're on a plane or in a car, most people don't even look up for that long, you don't even take note of that. It's much like the space called home. One really can miss the nuance, the real beauty of what makes home home. It's only when you've lost it that you really start to think back and say, oh, but it was actually a feeling rather than just the objects in that space, the warmth when you walk in, and knowing that kind of familiarity. And it's a similar thing with the sky, where I was born in Limpopo. I relocated from Limpopo to Pretoria. That for me was my first, I'd say that was my first interaction with that kind of tragedy, where I lost that relationship with the sky at first. So being reintroduced to it this year in this way, I think that is really what was that spark that said, oh yes, this is home. This is what home looks like. Yes, you're moving in and out of different spaces. And like I said, last year I looked for home in a different space, in the church. I looked for home in the patterns in my home. I looked at domesticity and I studied domesticity. And I thought, maybe if I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and start cooking porridge, that is what makes a home. But not necessarily, There are more things that are not in the seen world that makes a home really home. It's the unity, whether it's between people, whether it might be even between and objects that have been passed down from generation to generation, like my relationship with my great-grandmother's sewing machine. That for me is a physical object that grounds me to home. But if I were to lose that, I still have the skies that will never fail me. So yeah, I would definitely say it was not a conscious decision, but yes, it probably does come into play where I think of home or the sky rather. I think of the sky and I do notice that there are places that are more polluted than others, and it strikes me differently when I see a giant cloud in Limpopo or a cloud of smoke over Sandton. That does remind me where I am.
And I'd actually asked you a question about the sky. I mean, the colors that you choose to depict the sky. Could you tell me about that? How did you come about those colors? I understand lots of the work that you do is intuitive. And how do you think, after post doing all of this and now stepping back and being able to look at the work that you've done, could you tell us a little bit more about the colors?
The colors, so most of them are a palette that I've been working on for the last, let's say, 3 years now, including this year. And it's an interesting one for me because at some point there were too many. And that's why last year I had like those, that very uniform 3-color effect, that black, white, and red, because I wanted to move away from the color. But I think coming into a sense of self and being away from an institutional self, whether it's home, whether it's school, I realized that I had more freedom. And so I could work with more color and not worry about a critical eye that would look at it and think, well, this is a little too much. Do you want to maybe dim it down a little bit? So it was just all that kind of expression. It is an expression that I could not contain because I could not create for so long. There was no way I was not going to be able to express myself in such bold ways, especially having come out of this very challenging segment in my life. I think I would have probably, at some point I was sewing and it's still in process, but this huge tapestry made from vendor fabrics, patchwork fabrics. That's just how much I've wanted to express myself. So the colors really just are an expression of me wanting to express the good, the bad, the love, the laughter, the tears, every emotion that I've moved in and out of in the last few months.
I know in your artist statement you expressed that some of this work really evoked some of your childhood lived experiences. And I ask about your childhood experiences because you've employed abstraction in this new body of work that you're still in progress with. And I know abstraction is usually associated with children because of the abstract nature of it, but obviously you're not a child, and so I'd like to know how you got to thinking of abstraction. And I think what is particularly interesting to me is how your hand now is more present because you've used mark making, you've used spatulas, and you've used charcoal, you've even used thread on these new body of work. So how do you think abstraction has particularly been a mode for you to work in?
Okay. So as far as my memory serves me, I always love to think about like the storybooks I grew up on. I'm one of those young ones who believed that becoming Miss South Africa was a job title. And this is also because I read Cinderella, Rapunzel, all those storybooks very early on in my life. So I was brainwashed into believing that there is this kind of ideal self and that one can be. And when I reflect very much on that now, I find it very concerning because it is not a notion that is African to me. My wanting to find and constantly look for myself, my true self, is not rooted in an image that was created by Disney or any kind of Western or European media agencies. It is a self that comes up when I am not even aware, a self that is seen and not constructed. And I find it easier to express through abstraction, because those are the kind of images that happen intuitively. I love the process of intuitive work because in that space you're not relying on a historical image or a theme, rather the present to dictate the motions that you make, the the mediums that you apply, the colors that you employ, but really in essence you're creating an experience based on a need to relive that childhood expression. I keep telling this story of how when I was starting to draw the clouds, what also prompted actually the clouds in themselves was sitting with my 3-year-old niece earlier this year. And I was drawing those bubble clouds because that's what I was accustomed to, and that's what, we've mostly been accustomed to. And she drew these weird lines, and I thought, actually, maybe I've been looking at this all wrong. And which reminded me, because I'd say 2 years ago, I did a similar thing with angels. I looked at looking at the idea of an angel differently, and anchoring that theme within the space of the matriarch, and how an angel can be human, but we don't I didn't want to necessarily speak directly to my mom or
right.
My great grandmother, but an angel that existed centuries ago, that it still exists now, and what would they look like, especially if they are from Limpopo, not one that, I don't know, comes from somewhere else, but one that is very much anchored in my South Africanness or my Africanness. And I think that's a thread that has continued in my work, kind of wanting to reinterpret a decolonialized self, a self that is not new, but a self that is old and ancient even. And some of the interpretation is comical, some of it is strange. Some of these clouds that I created, I look at myself and I wonder, which cloud is pink? But I know that if I looked hard enough, I could find a pink cloud, but because of what we've been fed through TV and social media and all of that, we are most likely to think or believe that all clouds are white, but they're not, but yeah.
I think also what's interesting about the work is when you look at it, you don't necessarily immediately think of a map. Sort of the choice for abstraction has allowed for the work to be almost viewed in aside from just what it actually is depicting. Could you maybe describe to us, I experienced it earlier when you had your walkabout, what were the reactions that some of the people were saying that they were seeing?
So I tried by all means, especially throughout today, to allow people to first interpret and then give them an idea of what I was thinking, because that is still what my engagement with abstraction is, where you, like I said, when I sat down with my 3-year-old niece, we both interpreted things differently, the very same thing. But in allowing yourself to look at something and see it beyond what it is, you're able to actually allow your imagination to run wild. So there are people that said to me, and I loved this because then it made me think about my vantage point. It looked like those topical maps the weatherman usually puts up, where there's clouds and then there's the land underneath. And that's also a very interesting perspective to then look at the clouds from. Like if I were to look at the clouds from that angle, they would look very different. And if someone sees them like that, that's incredible. Someone said that they saw an island, and I thought to myself, oh yes, that reminds me of when I was growing up and traveling throughout the country, and we have these games that we'd play in the car, and we'd ask each other, what do you see in the sky? I spy with my little eye. And we'd all see different things, but it would just be just that one thing,
right.
And it made me enjoy the work all over again, because as much as I interpreted it and in making it, I thought this is what I was making, but being able to see it from so many different perspectives allows me to also see how expansive the topic can also be. Yeah, and I just, I did say I like that, right? Yeah.
If there's maybe two things you'd like people to walk away from looking at this new body of work that is still in progress, that you're still about to complete, what would those two things be?
Wow, that's a very hard question at this point, because I'm still looking for those two things. But I'd say at this point, my ability to, I mean, from what perspective am I saying this? Am I then saying, am I kind of allowing them to still interpret?
Whatever way.
Okay.
It's up to you.
So I would say, first, freedom to imagine. You know, yes, we box ourselves. I mean, not normally, but we don't allow ourselves a lot to imagine worlds that are beyond the ones that we see in the physical realm. So just looking at the work and allowing yourself to be taken beyond what you see. That's something that I would like them to take away. Anyone who's sitting here who'd like to go back and look at the work again should not limit themselves to what they see, but allow their senses to take them beyond. And then the other thing could be, sure, I actually don't have, like I said, I'm halfway through, you're right, it's still in progress. So the other thing could also be just expression.
Right.
Expression through color, expression through mediums, the mediums that I've worked with, allowing, whether it's themselves or even me, just giving me the grace to still work through this process, and coming back at some point to look at the work again and ask the same questions, whether I have arrived at the point that I wanted to arrive with the work. Yeah, so I'd say the second one would be grace. So it's freedom and grace. Yeah.
One last final question before we throw it out to the audience to ask us anything. As you mentioned earlier, as part of, and actually to the audience, as one of our mandates here still is to support primary caregivers, which is where Ditiro falls under. And earlier this week we had a conversation about motherhood, which you were also a part of, and I actually specifically saved this question for last, for this time and for last, because I knew we'd have this conversation today. As an expecting mother, how important do you think it is to have support in the arts?
Oh goodness, it's like having a backbone. It's like having a backbone. I would say even in the broader sense, the arts themselves do have a much, and I can be biased with this, and I would like to be, because I'm a mom, you know, but having also experienced loss, I know what that space looked like, and how, yes, although I was supported at the time, but if I had not been supported, I would have probably never come back to my practice, you know. So having support also means that a mother is able to do that, go and have the baby and take care and nurture, and then also still come back and reinvest energy in creating and being part of a community that supports that kind of natural progression in one's life. And that's what support means to me. Those who have come here today literally to support me, whether it's the organization still being here, have allowed and enabled me to actually see beyond this process. You know, I'm not fearful of what will happen in 6 months from now. I'm not too worried. I know, I mean, based on the past 6 months,
right,
I know I will create. You know, even if it's from bed and half of, you know, my body is like belongs to someone else, there will be some way I will create, because I know that I'm supported.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And now I'd like to turn over this conversation to our audience to see if there's any questions or anyone who's interested in asking anything. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, first, thank you both. Beautiful work. My question is, besides your niece, who are you inspired by or in conversation with?
It's always my mom. She helps me, especially with the language. So I grew up speaking Sepedi. I speak Sepedi fluently, but I don't write it because I grew up in the city. I went to white schools, but I've always had an affinity to my language, and my mom has allowed me to preserve my language through my work. So I consult her very much when I'm creating work. She's instrumental in the namings of my works as well, because she also understands the value and the beauty of a name. And in my culture, names are also very important. Names give an object, a person, purpose. And I think through her, and in many works that I've created, I've been able to carry that forward. So yeah, my mom.
I was very interested in that part you mentioned that she helps you in terms of you naming your kids. Normally I call my pieces my kids.
Yes.
So I would like to know, when do you name them, after or before? In that process, what happens when, how?
It's always, so I don't name them individually. I create names and then I look at them, and if the name fits, then they will take that name. You know. So I'm fortunate enough, and I think this is something that I speak to when I look at that installation work, because I have a lot of gifts, man. I was born with a full skill set. I was born with machines. I was born with needles in my hand. I had all those things. So when it comes to working, I already know, how something is going to almost pan out. It's almost always resolved. So when it comes to the naming, it's not hard, because that black piece was not liswisu. I didn't look at it and say, this is dark. I spoke to my mom, and I said, what is the darkness? Like interpret, what is the darkness? And then and then I said, ashi, and then it made sense. So while making the work, I didn't see darkness. I saw me, black and red and gold, and that's what I saw. And so much so with even the one that I called Duva, which is sun in Venda. My mom doesn't speak Venda, but because of the area that we come from, she originally comes from in Mangweng. That area they speak Sotho, Zonga, Venda. So she doesn't speak those languages, but she knows, she has an ear for them. And she was able to also help me interpret that. Like I said, only at the end of the process, and I was like, okay, there's a sun, there's sun somewhere here, and I found sun.
Okay, just to normally do you name them in your language, or also in the West language?
The West language comes when something is hard to describe in my own language, right?
Okay.
But that almost never happens. I almost always have a title, Kaspedi, and now because of where we are situated, then I have added Zonga, Venda. Okay, Sesotho was always there, but I still have to then interrogate Sesotho, because my great grandmother was Sotho, So I think that would be the next naming path that I take on. I love indigenous knowledge. I love indigenous languages. I think they add a lot of depth to the naming of children.
Thank you, and I'm very excited, because normally I name them in my home language, and at some point someone laughed at me, because normally must say, if I name them in that way, I also don't like when someone's gonna interpret that word in English, because at some point it loses the value when taken in English. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Say what's the name for son?
Duva. Duva. Yeah.
Zuba.
Duva. Remember, Kimopedi. So my dialect.
No.
Okay.
I'm just continue the conversation.
Okay.
One.
Yes.
African language. Okay. I'm Tawanda.
Tawanda. Nice to meet you, Tawanda.
Ziyanda. Ayanda. Bayanda. Luanda. Malwande. Wakanda. Rwanda. Colonizing. I believe in colonizing. So, Wakanda. Colonizing. I'm colonizing the word. It rhymes so much with the name. But, yeah, that's the thing. Even genetically, we traced one origin. And linguistically, there's a science of investigation, of history. Linguistics are very fascinating. So names are profound. They touch our destiny, where we're going, So, yeah, this is a very interesting conversation, and hence it's a lesson for all of us. Linguistics, Mukazi, Umfazi, Msadi,
Rakhat.
Mosetsana, Musikana, Mkazana, Mwana, Umtwana, like Kudla, Nyama, especially Nyama. Southern Africa middle, top, and then an island in America is called Vanuatu. Imagine that. You phones, guys, of internet, Vanuatu. Abantu. We have an international footprint. So, but anyway, there'll be another chat. But anyway, yeah, well, the originators of civilization were, I'm happy to be here, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, okay, Shum Tabisi.
I just wanted to ask a question about this gentleman brought up the thing about translating to English or interpreting in English, right? When you make the work and then the title like emerges, and you have an understanding that's like localized linguistically, like are you aware of anything that happens when you speak about it in English or when you translate the understanding of the work and the process into English?
It happens that I do name them. I do have the ones that I named them in English. She mentioned something interesting where she said, when she doesn't have an understanding of that particular word, you will at least use the English word. But for me, I was saying, I'm one of her. I was happy to find someone who says, I'm one of people who always look at our indigenous language.
Yeah. In English is always an understatement.
Yeah. I'm trying to come to Uber for a question. But from I was saying, I didn't come, then I come
Then tutorial, like so I wanted to
okay, so yeah, then because I believe with the transmissions in the scene, this one I share this out. Yeah, that's I hope you feel something.
Toliga kaloku ababuva abanye abantu apha. Toliga le nto yethu.
Okay, it. Oh, okay. So we're in a conversation about the word H, A, you know, and it's a visitor from across the continent, the sea, actually, from this across the sea, and they are hearing this word H and the word A, and they're asking me what's the meaning of the word, and I'm like, yo, it's a profound question, because I can say Ish, pain. You know, I've been bent, I've been stepped, you know, and then I'm like, in fact, look at that beautiful woman with a nice ass. You know, and food, delicious. You know, like it's one word. That's the thing about African language, that's not rich. It's about the surrounding environment around the experiences. It's about the tone of voice that you use. You know, it's one word, but it's so rich that there's so many meanings and interpretations. And you know what? When you say it to the people that are in the culture, when you say it in the right space and the right time, they get you. They don't even ask you, what the fuck are you trying to say? You know, like when you say ish and it's pain, they will understand. Skis and fish. You know, and then when you say beautiful woman, you know, yeah. So naming artworks in English most of the time is an understatement. It does in English, like for us Africans, does not express the full meaning of our art. That's why it's important to spell to title our artworks in our African languages. And